Hello, I'm Stella and welcome to my channel, and today I am speaking with, I don't know where to start, what type of writer you are. Memoirist, short story writer, filthy romance writer, young adult writer, Amra Pajalic. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So before we start, Amra, we are in a writing studio here.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this fantastic space.
Well, this is the first time I've ever had a writing studio, so it has been such a privilege. It's the Deer Park Hunt Club. So it's my local, it's this beautiful historic building that interestingly was a hunt club. And that
As in hunting.
Hunting, and they hunted deer, which is why it's called Deer Park.
Called Deer Park.
That's why it's called Deer Park, and that's why it's the Hunt Club Community Arts Centre.
I didn't know it was called Deer Park because of the deer.
That's right. I actually researched because when I got the studio, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And because the building is actually like, I don't know, 160, 170 years old, I was like, oh, I want to find out more about it. And I was like, oh, there you go. So this is my second year as an artist in residence. I get to come here and actually just completely dedicate myself to being a writer, which is a privilege because we don't usually get to do that very often.
And on the days you're not a writer, you're a teacher.
I am a high school teacher. I teach English, humanities, English as an additional language at my local high school, which is my former high school. All about St Albans, baby. I promote.
Yeah, like as a high school teacher in the teacher where you taught, do you feel like that gives you an affinity with the kids?
Yeah, it does, because I really understand the cohort. And there's so many things that I can talk to them about in terms of understanding, you know, coming from multicultural background and ethnic background, having a parents who have certain expectations of you, sort of, you know, feeling that division. But then interestingly, you know, like for example, I'm of Bosnian background, my parents are Bosnian, but it's a very important part of my identity, and I speak the language, and I know the language, but then I pick and choose which part of my culture I adhere to, because at the end of the day, I am Australian. So it's a very interesting thing. So there's things that I can connect with my kids, and just understanding their circumstances and what they're going through. And just, I love it. Like, the kids are why I love the job and why I love doing what I do.
Now, speaking of your identity and who you are as a writer, let's focus on some of the books. Like, how much of yourself and your identity and your, you know, your origins are in your books that specifically talk about. Now, the one I read most recently is The Cuckoo's Song, which is short stories, but would it be correct to say they're fictionalized versions of your life?
They are, and I mean, this is like, I always dreamed of having a short story collection published, because when you write, the best way to enter the writing industry is to build up your credits through writing short stories and finding your voice and finding what you want to write. So, you know, these are things that I've written over, like, you know, 2 decades of being a writer, that slowly built up my confidence and finding my voice. So, like, I tried very many different things, and then I had this crisis, and my husband, who is also a writer, kind of gave me this really good advice. He's like, there are so many people doing all these other things. What have you got that's unique? What do you have that separates you from everyone else? Because I was getting to this point where I was like, oh, is any point writing, you know, Bosnian stories? Am I limiting myself in terms of marketability and readership and that sort of stuff? And then when he told me that, I sort of realized I just wanted to write things that have meaning to me. Because at the end of the day, when you write a book and you have it published, however way you get it out into the world, you don't know what the reception is going to be. You don't know how it's going to be received. So you need to focus on the joy. At least that's what I'm doing. I'm just focusing on the joy of writing and sharing the stories that I want to share. So a lot of these stories were, you know, semi-autobiographical, memoir pieces that were published in different anthologies. You know, short stories where I was finding my voice, finding what I wanted to say. And it was just so much fun to actually just put them together in a collection and sort of see the breadth of everything that I did and wrote to. It's the first book I published under my imprint, Pishukin Press.
So, and the other interesting thing is, was it's got here the Dyslexic Books edition. That's another fantastic thing that you can do as a self-published author.
That's right. So as I wanted to think about myself in terms of a small business and in terms of an imprint. And so it was like, what do I have that I can do that is unique and that is different and that is something that is not seen very often? And as a teacher, I work with kids who have individual needs, who have different, ways of reading and different ways of processing. And so all of my books are published in dyslexic font. So when we look at the dyslexic font, it's actually designed differently. So it's weighted so that people who do have dyslexia, they can read it easier. And then I've also produced all of my books as audiobooks. So a lot of them are narrated by performers, but I also have audiobooks that are narrated by artificial intelligence. So this one is actually narrated by AI. So it's just sort of creating as many opportunities for people to read. And then I also have them all in large print, in hardcover, and then paperback and ebook, obviously.
And how is the reaction to that? Is that a marketing strategy, or is that you wanting to be inclusive, or maybe both?
Maybe both.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of came about because I was doing all these, before I launched into, I thought for a long time about what direction I wanted to go in terms of publishing, because I have been traditionally published. I had all of the lovely markers, an agent. I had, 2 offers to my first debut novel, won prizes, had beautiful reviews, all of that stuff.
And your debut novel?
That's right. So that was my debut novel, The Good Daughter, which I've now republished as Sabiha's Dilemma. So that got really great reception when it was first published by Text Publishing as The Good Daughter. And so I sort of I was thinking about how I wanted to move forward. And when I was thinking about self-publishing, it was thinking about it with that business mindset. So it was thinking about it in terms of what do I have to offer, and also if I'm thinking of it as an imprint, because I sort of had this little dream that perhaps this could be something that I could do for other people, not just for myself. So it was like, what can I do that is not being done out there enough, and that I'm not seeing enough representation of? And one of the things is the accessibility. So, not every book is produced as an audiobook because it is very expensive. And then there is only one publisher, one publishing house that does dyslexic font editions, and they buy rights from other publishers and then produce them as dyslexic font. And I thought, well, I figured out how I could do that myself. I thought, well, that's something that I can do that is a point of difference, and that is about providing that accessibility, and especially for my young adult text. So this is the first book in the series. It's going to be a 6-book series. I've got the first 3 books already published. So these are the second and the third so far. So Sabiha's Dilemma, and then I've got Alma's Loyalty, and then Jessie's Triumph. So they are produced in all formats.
So let's talk about them. So give us the pitch. Give us what are these books about? Are they young adults?
So they're young adult. They're about 6 young people growing up in a suburb called St Albans, which is a suburb that I live in and grew up in.
Tell us about St Albans.
So it's about, having a different cultural background, being Australian, about finding your sense of identity and belonging, finding friendships, finding love, finding your place in your community. And then that, chestnut, are you Australian? Are you not? What does that mean? Those of us who have come from, ethnic backgrounds, we have a lot of pressure placed on us about cultural expectations.
From parents or from the culture, from Australia, for example?
Well, initially it's from your parents. So, for example, I wrote an article in The Age about the fact that I married a man who is Bosnian and who is Muslim. And that was because I knew what family I grew up in. And the family I grew up in, if I did not marry into the community, I would not have I would be estranged from my family, and community. And the kids that I teach can relate to that. Like we're studying Anita Heiss's book in 9EAL, Barbed Wire and Cherry Blossom, which is about cross-culture, intercultural romance. And so many of our kids love it, but they can also really relate to it because they're like, yeah, that's not really going to fly in our family. And so, you know, that's what I'm sort of writing about. And I have LGBTQI representation because that's another theme that's really important. When you come from, you know, there's many ethnic communities that are not very accepting of LGBTQI. My community is not accepting, so that's something that I find really important and I want to give a voice to. And then also naturally, I kind of, like for example, in Jessie's Triumph, Jessie's best friend is on the spectrum, and that's just something that naturally happens because of the fact that I'm a teacher and I work with young people who are diverse in every way, and so that's kind of the world that I represent and I write about.
That's fantastic. Now, of these books, apart from the original one that was published by Text,
That's right.
you have now self-published and you continue to self-publish. What, I'm sure there's a lot of writers out there who go, or well, maybe they don't, because once you get published, it's a different story. Why do you self-publish? Because I tell you, you are such a prolific writer. You have like series of books. You don't just write in different genres, but you have series. So why do you, how much work do you want to do? Like, why do you self-publish? What is the...
Well, I mean, I had a dream run being traditionally published, and really, you know, the first book coming out, everything was just beautiful. But then the, 2009 crash happened, and forces were at work that, prevented and constricted the publishing industry, and that's what's kept happening over the past, 15 years that I have been in the traditional publishing space since my debut novel. There's been a lot of constriction of the publishing industry, acquisitions of publishing houses, shrinking of publishing opportunities. And so there are a lot of authors out there who are amazing writers. And it's getting harder to, get at the trough, as you may say. But also, the traditional publishing industry, especially in Australia, there's not much in the way of income to be made. And so you actually have more of an opportunity to generate income by being independently published.
And how? How does that come about? What?
Well, diversification of income. So the fact that I have published in all these different streams, the fact that I can partner. So for example, I'm also a romance writer, and my write under my arches. So one of my romance novels, I've done a partnership with a US publisher, and it has been published as a dual narrated.
Oh, so here you're May Archer with
Yes.
you call these filthy romance.
That's
don't you?
right. Although it's really interesting how I just had reviews of a novella that I just wrote that has been published in an anthology, right? And it is the most, because it was like, it has to be steamy, so I really, amped up the steam. And then one of the readers, one of the reviewers is like, not much steam.
Ah! You filthy thing.
And I just started laughing. I'm like, it's so funny how one person's idea of steam is another person's idea of vanilla, because there is such a spectrum now within the romance genre of the different types of writing. So this one I partnered with a US publisher to have a dual narrated American actors, because this is set in America, narrating this book in a royalty share arrangement. And so as they are selling, we each get a piece of the pie. And so, you just have more opportunities to do things as an indie author. When you are traditionally published, the publisher has purchased the rights from you, they decide what to do. But as a independent author, you have the opportunity to publish on various platforms, to find the best publishing platforms that you prefer, You do the publicity, you do the promotion, you do the marketing, you are paying the costs of production, but these days there are so many tools that you can really reduce the cost of it.
Are they Australian readers, American, English? Who?
Well, these are, because they're US, because when I first started writing romance, I sort of focused on US and that was the big market. So these, they're US, but they're international, and that's the other thing. As an indie author, I am now publishing to an international audience, which I did not do when I was traditionally published. Australian publishers bought my books and published them, and they bought the rights, worldwide rights, but my rights were not sold overseas, and my books are therefore not available overseas. Whereas as an indie author, I am able to publish all over the world and have readers all over the world. Overseas, that is where you can generate more income, and I am in a group, it's called 20 books to 50k. Check it out if you're interested in self-publishing. And the premise behind it is that if you write 20 books, you can earn $50,000 a year, which, might or might not work out depending on, life forces at work. However, that group, there are so many people making a living from writing. There are indie authors, I profiled some of them in Arts Hub. CJ Archer, for example, she is an Australian author living somewhere in this side of Melbourne, and she is publishing and making really good money. She told me a story where she spoke to an editor where they were wanting to maybe talk to her about publishing her books. And she said, this is how much I earn. And they had a coughing fit and were like, you're lying. And she's like, no, sweetie, I'm not. And so we actually have, Kerry Arthur is another one. She is earning 6 figures, who is an Australian author, unknown in Australia, but US readership. CJ Archer, she actually was featured on trivia, on a trivia TV show, as, which author has written these series. That's how far she has entered the, cultural capital of the US.
People who read independent books already reading independent books, how do you find those readers?
Well, most of the readers are reading ebooks.
Yes.
And they don't know, nor do they care who published these books. All they care is about reading. And they just care about finding books that meet their needs and that meet their tropes. And so most of these authors are making most of their income from ebooks. From the two big markets, Amazon, so Kindle and Kobo. And people don't, readers just read them and they follow them. And the writers who are hugely successful are the ones who have, 10 books plus in a series. And people fall in love with their characters, fall in love with their worlds. And this is another thing that's happening when you're traditionally published. Publishers are very risk averse, so they might commit to a series, but then as soon as they find that one of the books is not selling well, that's it, it's done. Whereas when you look at, what used to happen before is there was a nurturing of authors, nurturing of series, and so there would be that build up to find that readership. And people would just be in love with that author and read everything that they wrote. And that's not happening anymore much in the traditional publishing world. However, in the indie world, in the independent publishing world or the self-publishing world, that happens. We are able to just write books that we want to write and put them out into the world, and people read them, and if they like them, they will keep reading them, and therefore, there is that source of income, and then, the diversification. And then there are people who are translating books, they are just translating them for international markets, and then that is another source of income. So it's about exploiting your intellectual property, and basically doing that one book 50 different ways. Like, how many ways can you sell it? There's even, another thing that I'm going to be looking at is people putting their audiobooks on YouTube and monetizing their YouTube channels and then getting income from that, which leads to income from YouTube. However, it also leads to promotion of the books, because some people don't want to listen to commercials and they just want to get the audiobook and just listen to it in its entirety. So it's just an amazing world in terms of I have been learning so much. I have been just learning so many new skills and trying so many new things and finding out, all these opportunities and just keep trying. Keep
So here's a scenario. You're a writer, you've been working on your book for 5 years, like that is like your debut, well, possibly longer. You decide it's ready, you're going out pitching, you're not getting anywhere, and you might think about self-publishing, but you're like, but I've just spent all this work on writing the novel. Isn't it somebody else's time to do the work? I don't have time to find an editor or edit my work. How do I know it's any good? It's the argument is it's too much work.
I mean, it can be if you are. I mean, I have a lot of skills because of the fact that I was traditionally published and I really understood the publishing landscape, and I had written quite a few books and developed my writing skills. But I do also have a team that I work with now in terms of a narrator, a studio to produce my audiobooks, editor, proofreader. So, you do also create a team and there is an initial startup. However, these days, even with traditional publishing, they expect books to be at a really good standard because they have got the choice, and it is so many writers and so many amazing writers competing for the same slice of the pie. So they still have expectations of people paying for their editing before they submit.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
like if you want to submit to a publisher, it's like it needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
So you need to invest in paying, getting the editing support in order to have it developed as well as you can in order to get a publishing contract, because there are not many, like the publishing industry has become so stripped back. They don't have the people power that they had before in terms of the editing and the producing. Even now with after you get published, now there's the expectations you pay for a publicist from your tiny advance.
Yeah, you still have to do the work as a published author because you do think, when I get published it's going to be great, and then you get published and you get this tiny little 6-week window of opportunity.
And there is the expectation still these days that authors do a lot of their own self-promotion. However, the issue is if you are traditionally published, you've got your hands tied behind your back, because the publisher is the one that is responsible for a lot of this stuff, and the communication can be appalling, especially with the big publishing companies. Whereas as an indie author, I'm, paying for the publishing and the marketing and all of that. I'm, investing in my small business, but I'm also reaping the profits from it, and I'm also building my empire.
So what is the one, if you had to give a person who is embarking on self-publishing or thinking about it, what is the one bit of advice you might give them? What's the most helpful thing you could say to them?
Research. So before I actually spent a lot of years researching, because I was really debating back and forth, and I was still writing and submitting novels for publication. And even my last memoir, I had my agent submit it, and then she was like, didn't want to submit it any further, and I took that back and I found a publisher for it myself. So I was doing a lot of research. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, following a lot of groups in that space, and just collecting a lot of information so that when I started in this, they're still always learning. Like, even though you research so much, when you're actually doing it, you're like, but there is so much research you need to do. You need to do, research just like in terms of the writing and the editing and the publishing, but then you need to organize your metadata. You need to prepare categories to be published. You need to prepare blurbs and the different types of blurbs. You need to do your ISBNs. So there's a lot of preparation that you need to do. And then the actual publishing process, and then the marketing process. There's some great resources, so self-publishing, the Self-Publishing Formula podcast, Mark Dawson and James Blatch, they do a lot of information. Joanna Penn of The Creative Pen, Joining Ali, so the Alliance of Independent Authors organisation, have a lot of amazing resources, a lot of support. Because, you know, even things like getting an audiobook produced, you need to get a contract in order to negotiate a contract with your narrator so that you've got everything black on white. You know, so that, like, there's all these things, you need a business mindset and you need to understand it as a business mindset. But, oh, it is so satisfying.
Do libraries and bookstores carry any of your books?
Yes.
What's that word again?
Yeah, so there are some books in my libraries, and you can actually request any libraries to order any books that you want, not just mine, any author, and that helps us because we get paid for books, and also you can get ebooks and audiobooks through your library, which also helps us because we get paid for both things.
And where can people purchase your books as well?
Well, if you go to my website, amra.com, it's each page there's all the retail links that you can access, and then I've also got all the ISBN information if you wanted to request it from your library. And so my books are available on all online retailers. I have had some bookshops, you know, order my books and sell them. You can also ask your local bookstore to order them, and libraries, you know, everywhere.
So, talking about building your empire before, so that makes you kind of an entrepreneur. So how do you build your empire as such?
Well, you sort of need to think about what are the skills that you've got and what are the ways that you can monetize those skills. So some of the things that I've got is I'm a teacher, so I have been developing workshops and deliver them in different settings. But I'm also a memoir writer, so I've also been writing a lot of articles and getting those published freelance. And now I'm sort of writing teaching articles and publishing those. So when you are thinking of yourself as an independent author, because you need to have income streams and income that you can invest in your business, I found it's really made me think in terms of what are the different ways that I can try and generate income and generate money, and then, you know, put that back in my business. And that's the thing also about being a writer, regardless of where you are in your career, the hustle. You have to do the hustle, where it's like, you know, what are the different things that you can do to try and create a following, marketing opportunities, get yourself out there in the community, get your name known and build up your expertise. And then also, you know, when you're a writer, you can write anything, and I do. So, you know, just thinking about all the different things that you can do in order to make that income.
I do really get the sense though that because you were brought up in the area and you teach in the area, that you have your writing, a lot of your writing, apart from the Filthy Romance, is very about a particular community. So you have this kind of community feel as such.
And also a lot of the articles that I'm writing, I'm sort of thinking about what do I have to share with the world in terms of my community, in terms of my life, in terms of voices that aren't really heard enough.
Yeah, and we were saying before that even though it is set in a particular community, they do resonate. Like you were talking about Anita's book, Cherry Blossom.
Barbed Wire Cherry Blossom.
Barbed Wire Cherry Blossom was actually about a Japanese soldier.
That's right.
And a First Nations girl meeting each other. So that's very specific, but also it resonates quite widely with people talking about outside of their community.
And interestingly, it's not available as an audiobook. So get on that.
It's a few years old.
I know. And I wanted the audiobooks, I didn't have to read it to my kids.
Yeah. I remember being read to in high school. I loved it.
I know, I just get so tired, so I've been really naughty because it was an 11-week term.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't do it, and the kids were like, "It's okay, miss, we'll read it ourselves."
Now, she is another writer that writes quite broadly as well.
Yes.
Non-fiction, she edits as well.
Yes, and she's done the rom-com, where she did First Nations characters, rom-com, and, you know, I love what she was doing with that, which is, you know, like it's not like she writes historical fiction also. She writes you know, books about culture and books set within the historical context, but also just having some fun and just sharing, you know, stories. And so my initial romance novels are all US, but I'm starting a new series which is Kings of the Bay, and it's Australian coastal romance.
That's fantastic. I love it. Amra Pajalic, it has been fantastic to talk to you. Get onto her website, find some more information, and thanks for coming on my channel.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.